So our part is data ownership, and so I'm gonna go through like really quick. You guys see my screen? It says data ownership now. I got the right thing on. Okay, cool. So roles, and these are things like, again, when we go through like a training, there we talk about all of these different roles. And yes, I mean, in the academic version, they have all of these things. You probably don't necessarily need all of this to get started, right? So at the highest level, there's a council or a committee. If we're in the ideal world, we'd have at least two, senior executives on this team. If you're not in the ideal world, like most of us, it might be maybe just an executive sponsor. Right? We've seen it work that way. It could be a single person. The program manager or the process manager, as it's sometimes called, is probably the most important. Right, that's the one that does a lot of the work. Right, so you kind of need like maybe half a person, half of a full FTE to do that. Stewards and custodians you probably already have. It's just a matter of clarifying those responsibilities, and then of course the consumers. Right. So that this is the council. They review and approve policies. So we're gonna talk about what we should be concerned about. What are the artifacts? What kinds of policies do you need? But the council just kind of approves those. And one of the other things that you'll need is a way to like make changes, right? And to add or delete things, and the council would probably approve that as well. The point person is this program or process manager. They could be just called PM, in some cases. The data stewards, these are subject matter experts. So they can be kind of like the business owner SME. So we're going to go through a quick process of creating like a data source inventory. And so what we're going to ask is like, who's the business owner and who's the technical owner, right? So, the business owner is, the person that works with that data every day. And then there's the technical side, which is, in the case of the AMS, maybe you have a DBA, maybe you have someone that manages your list uploads or things for your marketing system, things like that. Okay, right. So the custodian is the IT or technical resource, and you could call them the IT owner or the IT subject matter expert. And then their consumers, which is everybody else, right? So these are your executives, your staff, and pretty much everybody that's using data assets to do their work. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Any questions on that stuff? All right, cool. So for our breakout, we're going to look at a couple of questions, right? What are the key roles and responsibilities, which we just did. Then we're going to look at what are the primary responsibilities of those business subject matter experts versus the technical, and we're going to do that kind of in the context of a data source inventory. Right. One sec. Stop sharing. So who has? I think that data source inventory, even for non-governance, associations, that's something that's pretty common. Everybody has one of those. Yep. All right, cool. That's so if you don't, the thing that we see sometimes is, sorry, I don't think I'm sharing the right thing. One sec. There we go. Okay, so if an association doesn't have a data source inventory, or they don't really have a handle on the ownership aspect of their data, it's mainly because it's just we have so many data sources, and we just haven't really thought through the concept of ownership. It's like okay, it's the marketing department or it's the membership department, and there's some people that work there and they own it. Right, so it's not much more complicated than that, really. It's just looking at separating out the business and the technical, getting a few key things on paper, which are what are the key systems, what are the purpose of those systems, or what kind of data lives there, what department is responsible, and then the data steward and the business owner. Now, The other things that I have here that are in gray, I purposely did that because like the blue ones those are the things that we would hash out in this first meeting, right? In this 1 hour type meeting. Then eventually we're going to want to know is that part of our SSO, our single sign-on, right? Do we have single sign-on connectivity with our AMS? We're going to want to know about connections with the AMS and with other systems. So what I mean by that is the integrations that send data, from one system to another, so that I can verify that someone is a member before they make a purchase, or I can update their address or their registration records in the proper systems of record when they interact with something else, right? So those pre-built or those point-to-point integrations between systems. Maybe I want to know if they're member facing. I'd want to know the actual name of the platform, right? So we might call it Connect, but the actual name of obviously is Higher Logic, or it's TradeWing, or some community that you use. You should probably know the location of it, within your systems, and that's typically just a URL. And then some basic things like who's the vendor, maybe if we have a contact, and then status. And by that, I really just mean active or inactive, right? So associations change a lot, right? And so just because you don't use that system anymore, it doesn't necessarily have to be deleted. From your inventory, you mark that as inactive. Sometimes they're going to have legacy data that you might need as well. Okay. So what I know what starting with AMS. I mean, what should we put for our let's fill out some of these, right? So we don't have to fill out every single AMS that everyone's using, but just so we have something useful as an example, for those that are going to be looking at this later. So I have a net form and a personify here. Somebody using another AMS besides those?
We actually use Dynamic CRM.
All right, Dynamic. And is that so not the branded versions, not one of the AMS products based on CRM, or just
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
cool. Dynamic CRM. Okay, and do you keep? So that's obviously for your member data, but is there prospect data in there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and does everyone have their sales transactions? I mean dues, of course, but other types of sales transactions also in their AMS?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I know that AMS goes across several departments, but is it? I mean, if we're going to classify it by one, it would be membership, I assume, correct? Yeah. Okay, great. Now, so Keith, who would you say is the business owner of your Dynamics AMS product?
Well, I kind of just started maybe a month and a half ago here.
Okay.
But I'm actually in charge of our data analytics, and so I would probably say that would be me.
Okay. What's your title?
Member Engagement and Insights Director.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so member engagement, and then what about on the IT side? Is there like a DBA or some sort of technical administrator?
I feel like there's multiple people that kind of have their hands in it.
Okay.
There's not one specific DBA. It's more developers who have managed it, but it's definitely managed heavily by the IT side.
Okay. Who has anybody do anything substantially different from that? I mean, I feel like at least as far as AMS products are concerned, I mean that's pretty standard. I mean, I think the member engagement and insights piece is maybe the most interesting, right? I mean, maybe In most associations, you would expect it to just be like the director or the, the vice president of membership or something like that. Not necessarily an analytics focused position, like with the business ownership of the AMS. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of a joint effort. I work really close with the VP membership.
Okay, so Evan, in your case, would you say that your team is the business owner of any of the main source systems, or really are just the analytics, which kind of sits on top of that?
It's an interesting question, because when I think about stewardship and business ownership, I kind of separate those a little bit, in that I would argue that our development team is probably the technical owner of the AMS. The individual business units would be the kind of business oriented owners of the content in different modules within the AMS. And I would consider them to be kind of the subject matter experts for those individual modules.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, because where I came from before, we were on NetForum, and how it's separated out into modules. So I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I'd almost kind of position, so I run a data analytics team. I would kind of position them as free floating stewards that sit between the SMEs and the true technical side. One of the issues that I kind of run into with data stewardship a little bit is that a lot of our business owners don't have the technical ability to go into a SQL database and query out a whole bunch of data and look for patterns and run crosstabs, right? But they hold the business knowledge. So there needs to be this kind of translation layer between the business knowledge and the dev team that's going to implement fixes, but the dev team's also not going to run all their reports and their crosstabs and help them investigate that data. So you get this kind of interpretation, pseudo-technical, pseudo-business expertise layer. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, because in your case with the separate analytics team, I mean, that's probably something that has to be addressed, in your ownership, where others might just have, one that's responsible for the, for the business side, just the inquiries, primarily, and the interpretation, and then the IT side, which is in many cases going to be the ones that are running those SQL queries and things as well, if there's not a separate focus on analytics. Okay, so what I think what we're saying here is specifically for the AMS, right? Because there's multiple modules, right? And because there's membership, there's events data, there's sales data, there's maybe certifications, or all sorts of different modules that the AMS covers. Then we effectively have probably the same IT stewards probably across those, right? Because that's based mostly on the system, but the business subject matter experts, we'd have to sort of delineate that out. There might be multiple, and there probably will be multiple based on the modules. Does that sound? Everybody agree on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think finding one person in an organization that wants to stand up and claim to be the business owner of the entire AMS is
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything to add, Andrew? You guys, what's your AMS?
We use Personify.
You do? Okay, cool. All right. And do you have prospects in Personify as well, or is it only members?
Prospects, and and the sales and everything is pretty much run through that.
Okay, good. All right, cool. So what else? I'll start with Evan. So what, aside from AMS, what do you think is the next, richest source of data? Like if you were doing an inventory and you only had an hour to make it, what would be next on your list?
Probably our email platform or learning management system. Pretty high on my list.
Okay, let's go email. What do you call that service? Do you just name it by the name of the product, or do you have an internal name for it?
Yeah, which I'm totally blanking. You can just call it Salesforce Marketing Cloud.
Anything unique about the contents? I mean, is it again, it's members and customers and prospects as well, or kind of what's the scope of?
I think that scope pretty much covers it. For us, it's primarily members plus folks that just want to receive information from Asha, so people that will join our mailing list, that kind of thing.
Yep. Okay. And it's owned by marketing? Do you have a communications department? Are they the same?
It's owned by our digital communications department.
Okay. I think I put that. Okay. And are there separate technical people that are responsible for that than the developers and the IT guys that work with the AMS?
There are at this point. I mean, the technical implementation in Salesforce Marketing Cloud, we typically handle through a vendor. Mm-hmm. And then our director of digital communications would be the primary data steward within that system. But if we're making kind of large data changes or changing the way data is exporting from that system, we have a vendor that's assisting with that at the moment.
Okay, and what about internally, the data estimate? Is that same director of digital communications? It
would be, yeah. I probably wouldn't put them as the custodian as much as I would consider them the steward.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, good. Okay, so in terms of yeah, okay. Most of the other questions that we run into with email are more around usage than ownership, right? You know, like don't use our email list for this or that, and you know, and that crosses over a lot with privacy and security and things like that. Yep. Okay, so you got that external vendor. That's great. What else are we using? Anybody using like HubSpot or Marketo, or one of the big sort of commercial marketing things?
We use Magnet Mail, but we are going to be moving over to HubSpot.
Okay. Okay. And what about the scope of your data there? Is it mostly member email addresses and?
Well, we import from NetForum into those platforms to communicate to our members and non-members about any of our specific events. So we use that platform for a lot of different things. But we do have the data that we gather from that is, who opened it and, which articles are more attractive than others. So there's some data that we would need to acquire from that platform.
Okay. Good. Okay. Let's go down to learning. Then we talked about that. Is there? I see a lot of different scope, right? When it comes to LMS, sometimes it's really just a list of courses. Other times it's something much more complicated than that. With certifications and different tracks and things of that sort. Does any of that matter for ownership, right? I mean, is the LMS? I mean, you have like a single, you have a learning or an education department, and you have someone within that department that owns your LMS and that data. Is that how it works? Anyone have it work differently than that?
That's how we are structured. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have an LMS but have it under membership, right? It's a member benefit and it's like continuing education or something like that. Okay. Is it fair to call that department learning, or do you call it something else?
Professional development.
PD. Okay, good.
Same concept.
Yeah.
Education.
Okay, that's good. I'm done violating my rules. There you go, it's governance. Okay. And so same question, yeah, that we asked about email. Is there any difference with the technical side of the whoever is managing the security and data integrity and changes, things like that? Is it still the same? Is it just one big IT team that you guys have, or one big team of developers or administrators that manage all of this? Or
I think this is kind of an interesting case because, I mean, the LMS for us is managed by, Crowd Wisdom. Crowd Wisdom is responsible for data integrity within the LMS and maintaining that system. I would view a steward as responsible for verifying that the data is being stored correctly in the LMS, or that the data is flowing back to the AMS correctly.